Hi, thanks for tuning in today. Got a question for you. Do you think our approach to God has changed from the Old Testament to the New Testament? There's a word in First John that really kind of dives us deeper into that question. Has our relationship in terms of how we can approach God, has that changed from the Old Testament to the New Testament? Before we dive in, though, I'd like to invite you to go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. That really helps out a lot. And then hit the subscribe button. Just kind of lets YouTube know to promote these videos, and that's a big help to me. So I've really been, this is I think the fifth installment of this where I'm kind of reading through the Greek New Testament and sharing things that I've been learning as I go along. I went all the way back to First John. I'm currently reading in Galatians right now, but I wanted to pick up some of these insights from some of the earlier books that I've read. And the the program that I'm using is Master New Testament Greek. And go ahead and look in the description there. Check that out. It's a great way to learn Greek or to kind of hone up on your skills in Greek. It's a great program. But one of the other things, if you would, one of the other things I do on this channel is I review Greek New Testaments and things related to the Greek New Testament. I just did a review on a lexicon that really helps with your devotional reading. So now we'll dive right into the question in there in 1 John. So there in 1 John 5 and verse 14, we'll display the scripture right there in Greek. And so this is how I would translate that. And this is the boldness that we have toward him, that if we ask according to his will, he hears us. And so when he says that we have boldness, that Greek word right there is parousia. Let's pull it over to here, and I'll put it right there. That Greek word parousia really kind of stuck out to me, and I was curious about, is there any significance to this word? As I was reading, I reread 1 John 5 because there wasn't anything that I remembered that had really stuck out to me too strongly. But as I reread it, this word kind of stuck out to me, so I looked into it just a little bit and looked at some of the ways it was used throughout the New Testament. It has that connotation of boldness and freedom of speech. One source that I looked at said that the Athenians claimed as their liberty this freedom of speech, this boldness, this openness. And one of the things I was interested in is, was it used elsewhere in the Greek Old Testament? By the Greek Old Testament, I realized the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. But I'm talking about in the Septuagint. Because for many people in the early church, if they got to read their Old Testament, for many of them it would have been in Greek. It would have been the Septuagint. And when you look at this word in the Septuagint, it's not used a whole lot. One of the things I was curious about is, did people in the Old Testament have this confidence and this boldness to come before God with requests? Because when you think about it, coming to God with boldness, think about this, as just a flesh and blood person, to come before God. I think one place I read one time is in first century Judaism. The Jews didn't even think that the angels could look directly at God, or some of the angels couldn't look directly at God, something like that. I mean, this is this holy God, and to think that you could come before him with confidence, with boldness, not just and shamefacedness and your head turned down low, but to come before him with confidence, to come with him in boldness. And one of the questions I had is, was this something that Old Testament saints could they do that? And it was interesting because the only place I could find this word when it was in reference to anything like prayer was in Job 27:10, and I'm talking about in the Greek Septuagint. If you look at this in the Masoretic text, in the Hebrew Old Testament, it's going to read a little bit differently than this. But let me give it to you, and I'm going to give a common, just read it from a common Septuagint translation, one of the older translations. I think it's in the public domain. And in Job 27:10, it says, "For what is the hope of the ungodly, that he holds to it? Will he indeed trust in the Lord and be saved? Will God hear his prayer? Or when distress has come upon him, has he any confidence before him? Or will God hear him as he calls upon him?" Now, specifically, this is the context of someone calling upon God. Or will God hear him as he calls upon him? And Job asks, and it seems from the context that he's expecting the answer no. Has he any confidence? Has he any confidence or parousia that God will hear him? Does he have this boldness? And because he's wicked, because he's ungodly, we would expect him not to have this kind of confidence, this kinds of boldness. But what was really interesting about this, to me anyways, when you look at the Greek text that underlies this translation that I just gave you of the Septuagint, first of all, we know that the word parousia is there. I just mentioned that to you. But there's another word in verse 8 that was also interesting, and it was the word for ungodly. And it could be translated ungodly or irreverent or something of that nature. Asabias is the Greek word that's used there. And what hope is there in the ungodly? The
Asabes.
What hope do they have? And what's interesting to me is that Job anticipates that these ungodly people don't have any hope. They don't have any confidence. They don't have any parousia. But then look at Romans 5:6, and I'll display that in Greek here on the screen. But well, depending on what translation you're using, it's going to say something like this: "For we being weak, according to time or in due time, Christ died for the ungodly." And that's just a rough translation. I should have had a translation written out there, so been a little bit smoother. But you get the sense. We were weak, we were without strength, and then Christ died. Guess what?
Christ died for the Asabes.
For the ungodly, for the ungodly ones, for the ones that Job said did not have any right to have confidence before God. These are the ones that Christ died for. And now I just want to close with a passage from Hebrews, and I'll just read it to you in English. In Hebrews 4:16, "Let us therefore come boldly." Come boldly. Guess what word that is? Parousia. Let's come boldly, with confidence, with assurance, unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and may find grace to help in time of need. So to me, it's a comfort that we can come before God with this sort of boldness, a sort of confidence that we can have, because in due time, Christ didn't just die for the righteous. He died for the ones that were irreverent, the ungodly. And because of that, we can have confidence and boldness when we approach the throne of grace. So again, guys, I'd like to thank you for watching this. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button, and hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this. If you're interested in reviews on things related to the Greek New Testament, I'll be putting those out there as well. And thanks again for watching.